Hello, everyone, and welcome to another in our weekly webcast series here at the Kissimmee Osceola County Chamber of Commerce, where we are champions for business and community. I'm John Newstreet, President and CEO of the Kissimmee Osceola County Chamber of Commerce. And today's webcast is sponsored by another true champion, AdventHealth. They bring us a guest today, Dr. Victor Herrera. Dr. Herrera is a specialist in infectious diseases there at AdventHealth. And today we're going to talk about the COVID-19 vaccines. Big news this week, very much needed. And so we'll bring Dr. Herrera up, and I welcome you, Dr. Herrera, to the webcast.
Good morning, John. Thank you. Happy to be here.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So a lot of topics to cover. We got a series of questions, so we'll get right into it if you don't mind. The first question, what is AdventHealth's involvement in COVID-19 vaccine trials?
I think that since the start of this pandemic, AdventHealth has really been committed to the safety of our patients and our teams. And so we've been working in all the things that will help us deliver on that. So around 6 months ago, even before a vaccine was being discussed as being approved, we started to work in how to get ready for when a vaccine was approved, like it was approved through an EUA last Friday, and build those internal capabilities. At the same time, we've been involved on the research side with testing some of the vaccines prior to their approval. So we've been participating in a Johnson & Johnson trial. And now, after the EUA approval of the vaccine from Pfizer, our hospital is going to be amongst the first hospitals in the United States that is going to be receiving that vaccine and administering following state guidelines.
Outstanding. We'll talk some more about that in a second, but I'm curious, what should people know about COVID vaccines?
I think the most important thing is to recognize that when you are in the middle of a pandemic, a vaccine becomes one of the most important things to return to life before COVID-19. So from a public health perspective, an infection control perspective is one of the most important things that we can have. It's also important to know that although it feels that everything happened very fast, these technologies that made possible the vaccine that we have today, they have been in the works for decades. The other thing that is important to know is that an EUA by the FDA is not granted until standards of both efficacy and safety are met.
Mm-hmm. So safety is crucial, even though it was expedited. What more should the audience perhaps know about clinical trials and medical research related to the vaccines?
It's very important to participate in clinical trials. It's important for the community to understand the important contribution when they participate in a trial, because that's how we know if things are safe and also if they work, if there is efficacy. And it's important that all communities participate. So COVID-19 has disproportionately affected certain communities and minority groups. So it's important that those groups also participate in trials, because that's how we know, again, the efficacy of the vaccine and the safety.
Okay. And we've talked a little bit about certain groups being affected. So whom should this be particularly important that they pursue this vaccine?
Again, I think the call is for all in the community. The vaccine first is going to be given to those at highest risk. And we are following both state and guidelines from organizations in the United States that's what they do. They make recommendations aligned with the science on who should receive the vaccine first. And then after that, there were going to be several phases until we can get to the goal of making it available for the whole population. So really is all communities, all groups need to think about the vaccine, and it should be a priority.
So So the vaccines are a priority. You mentioned Ensemble, which was a vaccine trial. My understanding is you're wrapping that up this week. Is there still a chance for people to reach out if they're just now learning about it today? And can you talk a little bit more about Ensemble?
So Ensemble is a study by Johnson & Johnson. Is one of the vaccines that is being studied. Since the beginning, we were thinking as an organization, how can we contribute to studying new vaccines? And that's how we became one site, which is a part of a group of sites around the world that is studying this vaccine. That also reminds me of an important point to make everybody aware of, is that there is going to be most likely several vaccines. There is going to be some differences in the technology, but they are not going to get approved until all of them also meet the minimal safety and efficacy standards.
And in the pre-show, we talked about those multiple vaccines really being treated as one. So only one has the emergency authorization. Another one is due this week. But they're very similar, and so a group wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards one over the other. They're being treated as one. Is that correct?
That's correct. So we had an emergency authorization approval last week on Friday for the first vaccine. The second one that is going to the FDA this week shares a very similar technology. And then we expect soon to see data from the other vaccines that are being studied to see if they also get approved. So we think that we'll probably end up with a group of different vaccines, all with the goal of preventing the COVID-19 disease. And I think as more data becomes available, we'll see if there are some differences between them. But the first two, they use the same technology.
Very good. Now, if you've already had COVID or you come across an antibody test, does that say I'm good to go from now on, or can you talk about the antibodies?
Thank you, John. That's a very important question that we get a lot, which is, if I already had COVID-19 and I have recovered from COVID-19, why do I need to take the vaccine? And the answer is that there are still things that we don't fully understand about the virus. One being, can you get COVID-19 again? So the recommendation is that even if you had COVID-19 in the past, right now, if you are one of those groups that meet criteria following state guidelines to receive the vaccine, you should still take it, because it will be good for you to have that protection even if you had COVID-19 already. So when you ask about the antibodies, which they basically tell us if somebody has already been infected with the virus, is the same answer. Even if you had antibodies, when the vaccine comes out, if you are eligible to take it, the recommendation is that you take it. There are things that we don't know. It's possible that in the future, as our knowledge evolves around antibodies and what they mean and prognostic value that they have, we may change some of these recommendations, but right now, it's still recommended that you take the vaccine.
In the pre-show, you had mentioned there might even be some research, and again, there's more research to find, and research is a funny thing because we're learning along the way here, but antibodies may actually decrease. Even though you have them, they may decrease. So another good reason, even if you show antibodies, to get the vaccine, correct?
That's correct. So there's been studies that show that anywhere between 3 to 6 months, we may see a decrease in the antibody response. The antibodies is something that we can measure in the blood in an easy way, but we think that there may be other parts of the immune system that, even if we cannot measure them just with a blood test, may still give some protection against the virus, even if the antibody goes down. So that's an example of this type of things that we're still studying. And that's why we say, even if you have antibodies, even if you had COVID-19 before, at this time, the best way to be protected is to get the COVID vaccine.
So vaccines coming out this week. It'll start to be distributed to, I guess, frontline workers who have the greatest exposure rate, and nursing homes here in Florida, so that those are our most vulnerable. And slowly but surely, it'll reach out to the population. I'm sure that'll be communicated as that happens. So the vaccine's in town this week. Does that mean COVID-19 is going away, or we still got a road to recovery that's going to take some time before we truly are out of the woods in the COVID pandemic?
Having a vaccine is a very important step to start the end of the pandemic, but it's not the only step. We still need to follow the guidelines in terms of safe behaviors, wearing masks, hand hygiene, distancing as much as possible. And it's all those things combined, including the vaccine, that will give us the opportunity to control the pandemic.
I know for our friends in Orange and Osceola, there's still a mask mandate ordinance in place. So even though there's no associated penalties, at least here in Osceola, a mask mandate is in place. It is required. Certainly, it's a common courtesy to your fellow man. So please consider always wearing that mask, always washing your hands. And in both Orange and Osceola County, to help our business community, they have strike forces going around really trying to coach businesses and remind businesses that we aren't out of this yet, and that these safety protocols are there to help us get out of this. So I wanted to make sure the audience knew that there's still a mask mandate and that we aren't in the clear. So I appreciate you expounding on that, Doctor. Anything else you want to share about these vaccines or the pandemic or anything great happening there at AdventHealth as we close out here in a minute?
John, so we get a lot of the question about risks from the vaccine and how safe a vaccine is. And I think that's an important question because, yes, we recognize that it's a relatively new vaccine. So people think, could there be risks associated with this vaccine? And I think we shouldn't think about risk or no risk. We need to think about relative risk. So risk of a vaccine versus the risk of actually getting COVID-19 and the implications of that. And it's that risk versus benefit ratio that is the way that we should be thinking about it.
And certainly as we are learning as we go along in England, where they've started to distribute the vaccine, they've already amended their guidance. So if you have allergic reactions, they've cautioned taking this. Is that correct? So it's not to say, hey, just take it and we're blind to those risks. It's we will continue to be safe as this is administered.
And there is a very high level of attention to everybody who is getting the vaccine. So we learn every time that we give a vaccine, and we learn that every day, and then we adapt to what we are learning. So you are correct. And I think more information is going to be become available, and every day we learn more.
And as we close out, I'll just recognize that AdventHealth is one of the first hospitals to receive the vaccine here in the state of Florida. So high marks of confidence from our elected leaders to work with AdventHealth and the community here to get this vaccine out. So thanks for joining us today. Thanks for all you're doing day in and day out to protect us and keep us healthy and safe. And we look forward to learning more as we learn more together through this vaccine. But I'll have you close out with maybe a final admonishment on vaccines, that they should get vaccines, and even if they do, continue to wear the mask until we're all clear. Is that right?
Yep. Thank you, John. Yes, it's not just the vaccine. The vaccine is a great thing, but we cannot forget about mask, distancing, hand hygiene. I mean, this is really historic that these vaccines got approved. I think we're going to look back 20 years from now, and we're going to remember this day, when we started giving the vaccines for COVID-19, and we really started to end the pandemic.
Well, we archive these webcasts, and we will look back and say what strange times we lived in. But we're in them. We got to get out of them and to bigger and better things. And with partners like you, we can do that. So, Dr. Herrera, thank you again for joining us. Thank you, AdventHealth, for sponsoring today's webcast. And we will see you again next week here on the webcast at Kissimmee Chamber. Take care.